Hello, I'm happy to see everyone here. We're going to begin. Just to make sure, can everyone hear me? Just give me a thumbs up just to make sure that everything here is good. Okay, great. So my name is Shuvi. I've been emailing you the last few days, and I'm really excited to start this new series, this new webinar series. With me here today are a few people from the NLI, and I'll introduce just a couple of people quickly. And also Lior Hameiri, who's here from the Israel Engagement from UJA Toronto. Thank you, Lior, you can wave, for your partnership on this project. And with me are also Michal and Dara, who work with me in the library. They're here for you in the chat box for any technical or other questions during the session. I'm just going to say that we have a lot to accomplish in this 1 hour that we have together, and I'm very mindful of the time we have. It's very valuable. So I'm going to pause a few times during the session for some short comments or a question or two, but you will have a feedback form in the end, and you'll see there'll be plenty of other ways for you to express yourself during the session. Less verbally in the gallery view of everyone speaking to each other, but that's actually part of what we're trying to accomplish today, is to sort of explore new ways of how to have a discussion, especially online with so many participants. So hopefully you'll find that valuable and something that you can also use with your learners in the different environments that you teach or work. So here we are having our first session about the Rabin Memorial Day. I'll also refer to it during the session as Yom Rabin, as it's called in Hebrew. What will we be doing today together? Well, we're going to be speaking a little bit about the complexities of Yom Rabin in Israeli society. And we will see how NLI, or the National Library of Israel Resources, can help us facilitate a discussion on this topic and others. This will just be modeling how you can use NLI resources to really facilitate a discussion about any topic. And at the end of this session, you'll get this whole presentation with very useful links also attached, where you can go and search and get to know our resources in a much broader way. And of course, in the coming sessions, we'll be talking about other issues and other days. But here you're going to have some more concrete examples for Yom Rabin. We're also going to experience as learners, and also think about as educators, some pedagogic tools that you can use in your learning. And we're going to, again, be mindful about how to maximize our group learning here together. So here we go. What is the NLI, or the National Library of Israel? I sent you a short video in the email, and I hope you all watched it. And if not, if you didn't have a chance, you can watch it later. Basically, the NLI was established in 1892. It was not established when the State of Israel was founded, but rather it actually started as the institution of preserving national memory. This was way before people started even thinking about the State of Israel as an entity we know today. And basically, its main mission is to serve a home for the collections and the archives of the Jewish people. And in that sense, I think that the NLI is not just another library. It really is the treasures of the Jewish people. And it serves not only the Israeli public, but the Jewish world at large. And I think that a lot of what we're going to be doing today comes to show how the National Library can be relevant and useful to Jews all around the world, learning about their history, learning about their culture, and actually helping us to preserve their stories and their culture in different places in the world. So what is in the NLI, or in the National Library of Israel? Multiple, of course, you can see here, multiple books and manuscripts, but not only books live in the library. In the NLI, we have many other kinds of artifacts and manuscripts and ephemera that it really makes this library very, very special. And again, it really holds the treasures and the memories of many communities around the world and from different times in history, including music and photographs and things that you might not necessarily find in other libraries in the world. Today, we're going to be talking about the notion of machloket, of dispute or argument. And there's a very famous quote from the Mishnah that relates to machloket or dispute. And the quote goes like this: every dispute that is for the sake of heaven will in the end endure, but one that is not for the sake of heaven will not endure. Now, this is a little bit counterintuitive, because when we think of arguments or conflicts, I think usually our tendency is to want to resolve the conflicts and not live in a state of argument or dispute with the people who live around us, with our environment. But here we have a very interesting idea where machloket actually is almost a value in Jewish culture. And we'll see that today we're going to be speaking about a day that not only deals with machloket, Yom Rabin, and we'll see how that came about. But also there's quite a lot of dispute about the actual day, and we'll break that down in a few moments. I just want to maybe clarify something about how we're going to be working together today, since I know that many of you are educators and you work in the field with learners or with communities. Some of you might work in organizations, and you might not be a teacher in a classroom per se, but I think that a lot of the things we're going to be speaking about can enrich anyone. And definitely, I really hope that you pass this on to more educators that you know. And I think it's really important to find that link also to the things that are happening in Israeli society, and to sort of get an insider's glimpse into how things unfolded in Israeli society around Yom Rabin. I do encourage you again to write us in the chat box if you have any specific questions. But I do want to make it clear that this isn't going to be a Zoom tutorial per se. I'm actually not going to even be using breakout rooms or methods like that during this session. And it's actually very intentional, because I want to show you that we can use quote unquote old school kind of methods through online learning that can really benefit our learners and the process of learning. So what we're going to be doing today is actually having some disputes or arguments or discussions, and you'll see how it'll all come about. So like I was saying, this is a little counterintuitive, like why preserve conflict? And I think that many of us as educators and as leaders would think, how do we know when the right time is to embrace that conflict and disagreement, but when it is the right thing to do to resolve and conflict and bridge our differences? So that reminded me a little bit about the famous saying, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Or I could tell you that these days I'm in need of a lot of coffee and other things to help me sort of balance all of the challenges we're dealing with these days. And I think that many times we're looking for that answer, like when is this a discussion in the classroom or between friends or in the family that we really want to sort of say, enough, this isn't going anywhere and we really shouldn't be arguing about this. And when are the moments when we say, wow, this is a really important conversation, we really should continue speaking. And just by virtue of speaking to each other and not giving up, we're sort of showing that we have a bond of trust with that other person. And we're confident that we can talk things through, even if we disagree, we can agree to disagree, but we don't give up. Something about stopping to talk to someone represents maybe giving up on the relationship. And I just want to say that's true of Israeli society. And these days we see a lot of tension in Israeli society and in other countries. And it's true also of the communication between Jewish communities around the world. I think that as long as we keep our conversation going, that really shows that we're still in this together. And what I would like to do is now is to show you a little bit about the disputes or arguments that came to be around Yom Rabin itself. So what's the debate about Yom Rabin? So first of all, this is a photograph taken from a collection we have in the NLI. It's called Dan Hadani collection. He's a photographer who took this picture. And we see this poster of the Oslo Accords with Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat shaking hands. For some people, that image really is the epitome of striving for peace and looking for a solution and trying to really solve the conflict between Jews and Israelis and Palestinians. And here we have a poster that says "Partners to Murder," meaning someone else reads that image as something that is actually very negative. And that leads to the main debate around Yom Rabin is the actual events themselves, what the tensions that were in Israeli society at the time, a lot of feeling of mistrust and accusations all over the place. And I'm talking even before the assassination of Rabin, meaning the tensions that were in Israeli society at the time. Things were very, very heated. Personally, I was a senior. I was in 12th grade at the time. And I have a very, very vivid memory of that night. I was actually babysitting, and I basically was watching the news or watching something, and then this comes up on TV, and I was really shocked. There was this like feeling of chaos at the time, and right after the assassination, there were many, many mutual accusations from the left, from the right. Was this an individual's doing? Was this just Yigal Amir doing what he thought was right, but he wasn't representing anyone else? Or was his action actually mirroring something very toxic that was happening in Israeli society, and that maybe there were people who supported what he did? And of course, as many of you know, the tensions only grew after these events. Another part of the debate around Yom Rabin is actually connected to the date itself. Here we have an image of a calendar actually from a community in Jamaica in 1798, showing us the Hebrew dates and the dates in English, and how they correspond to the dates on the regular calendar. And the truth is, I don't know if many of you know this, but the actual date of the assassination of Yom Rabin, of Yitzhak Rabin, was on November 4th. 1995, and that year, that was the 12th of Cheshvan. But after the assassination, there was a huge debate about whether or not that day should be commemorated on November 4th or on Yud Bet Cheshvan. Now, you might say it's a small detail, it's a small question. What does it matter? It happened on a certain day, and we're going to commemorate it for years to come. But it actually took 2 years till the second anniversary of the assassination for the decision to be made. And today it is commemorated officially in Israel on Yud Bet Cheshvan, which comes out on a different date, usually in November, but on a different date in November every year. There are actually some people who still commemorate it on November 4th. Now, why is this such an important question? As you can assume, the Hebrew date in the Hebrew calendar has significance, and the question of whether or not in the state of Israel we commemorate events and and things that happen in the state of Israel on the Hebrew date or on the date from the Gregorian calendar is a big question. For some people, it was critical for it to be on either one of them. And what's also interesting is that on Yud Aleph Cheshvan, the 11th of Cheshvan, the day before what is now commemorating the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, is the day of Rachel Imenu, Rachel from the Bible. Her yortzeit is on the 11th of Cheshvan. Now, you would think, again, this is a little petty detail, but for some schools and for some communities, it really posed a conflict between what do we commemorate on this week or on these 2 days that we have. And it sort of complicated the situation where they had to choose whether or not they're going to invest their time and their educational resources in the day Yom Rabin or the day of the yortzeit of Rachel Imenu. So it did have some significance. And again, ultimately, it was decided that it would be on the 12th of Cheshvan. This leads to the next debate about Yom Rabin, which is what really is the educational focus of this day? Is this a day about Yitzhak Rabin, the man who really, he's the epitome of the Israeli, born in Israel, fought in the wars. He had a very, a really important military career. He was a politician. He really, for many, many people, he's like a symbol of the successful Israeli who contributes to society, who's done so much. Is that what we're commemorating on this day, or are we commemorating the assassination itself, the tensions that led to it, this terrible deed of someone making the decision to kill a prime minister of Israel, a fellow Jew? And for many years, there was a lot of tension around the educational focus of this day. Schools in different sectors of Israeli society were struggling with how to commemorate this day, to the extent that some people felt that putting the emphasis on Yitzhak Rabin's life was a mistake, because it made people who couldn't sympathize or didn't agree with his opinions, it made it really hard for them to commemorate this day and sort of make that connection and be engaged. And as the years went by, this day has become more and more a day about democracy, about how to have civil discourse, about taking responsibility for our words. And here you have an example of a poster that was designed there's a competition every year through the Rabin Center for designing posters that relate to the day and what their message is. And here there's a really a very vivid example of how words can kill. So we have the keyboard in the shape of a pistol, of a gun, and it really goes to show that this day really isn't about Rabin. I mean, of course, Rabin was a symbol, he was important, he was a leader, but the emphasis in the long run for Israeli society is really about how we deal with conflict and how we settle our differences. So what I've shown you till now is really the three main debates around Yom Rabin. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for 1 second so we can see if there are any comments or questions at this point. If someone wants to say something before we move on. Okay, so we're going to continue. What I want to ask you now, and I hope that you all are familiar with your annotate function in your Zoom account. If you, I don't know if you can see it on my screen, but there's something called annotate. What I'd like for you to do, it's right next to the share and on the same bar as the chat is. I'd like for you to put some kind of scribble or stamp or something indicating what your opinion is on this question. Should Yom Rabin be commemorated as a fast day? That was one of the suggestions around Yom Rabin, that Israeli society should commemorate Yom Rabin as a fast day, just like other fast days that really symbolize destruction and chaos and tragedy in Jewish culture and Jewish history. All right, so I see there are a few people already writing their, scribbling their little or checking their opinion on this scale. I'm encouraging a few more people to do so. And in the meantime, what we're gonna do is we're gonna share in the chat a Google form. And I'm gonna ask you to fill out the Google form. It'll take you a minute or two, and then we'll regroup to see your responses on the Google form. So take a minute to fill it out. Michal's going to share it now in the chat box. So as you'll notice, there's a Google form in the chat box. I'd like for you all to click on it and just fill it out. Take a minute. Okay, as you're filling out the form, I'm already sharing on the screen the responses, okay? It'll update while people continue to fill out the form. What I want to suggest is that this is a very simple tool, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with Google Docs and Google Forms, and probably most of your learners as well. This is a very simple tool where I purposely phrased certain questions in a certain way with different options in the form so that, as you can see, the graphics of how it looks is very different for each question. So first of all, you can get a glimpse of how many people are here from different places. We have people from all over the world here, and it's really exciting. And also when it comes to seniority, we can see that a lot of people, more than a third of the people in this crowd, are in education for around 30 years, and that's amazing. And we have quite a lot of people who are also in education around 20 years in Jewish education. So the majority of you are really senior and educators, and that's really exciting to see how many people are here. There's something about looking at this pie of the group for us as facilitators or educators. Sometimes on a Zoom meeting like this, we can't actually engage and speak to every single person participating. And it might be students that we know, it might be people that we don't know so well. And this is a really nice way of getting people to sort of feel the room and see who else is here. This is something that you can also do in the beginning of a meeting. And it just gives you a sense of where you are also relative to the group. So it shows us a little bit about who's sitting in the room with us. And let's look a little bit at this graph for a second. On the question of, do you think Yom Rabin should be commemorated as a fast day? We saw the question of the scale, the yes and no. We had a few people writing yes, we had a few people writing no. Here, I don't know if you noticed, but there are quite a lot of people in the middle, right? 2, 3, and 4 really represent the sort of people maybe who aren't so sure, don't have such a strong opinion on the topic. And again, this is an anonymous form, so nobody has to feel intimidated by where they are. And I'm thinking of younger students who might sometimes hesitate when it comes to expressing their opinion. Here they have a chance to just say whatever it is they wanted to say. Again, they're saying it not by verbally expressing themselves, but by filling out this form. And they don't have to be worried or hesitant because someone is going to say, oh, I can't believe you think that Yom Rabin should be a fast day or not. How could you say that? So that gives them a safe space to sort of say what they think, and it also gives them a sense when we look at the responses together at where they are. Are they in a minority, or is the majority of the people in the class, in the group, in agreement with them? It just gives them a sense of that. So on the question of, is expressing your opinion on a scale a discussion? Most of you think it is not a discussion. And most of you also think that the reason it isn't a discussion is because a discussion must include listening to other opinions. I just want you to notice that no one chose this reason, because without a group conversation, it's not a discussion, meaning most of you think that the basis of a good discussion or a real discussion is listening to other people. And a quarter of you also wrote that it's not just about saying yes and no about something, it's actually explaining why you think so. Now let's look at this last graph. We see that for many of you, the values or the ideas that I put down on this Google form are actually extremely significant in your point of view. We have quite a lot of people who think that tolerance in democratic society and learning from history and all the other various things that we're here are very, very important. Again, I could have chosen other things. Sometimes it's actually deliberate. An educator, a teacher, or a facilitator can choose something that they think most people will probably say is not significant at all. And then we would probably see some more blue spots here. For instance, I didn't write here learning about Yitzhak Rabin. I did write important figures in Israeli history, and I noticed that There are some people think that that's not significant at all. There's one person who wrote that. We don't know who. But this is just an example of a way to sort of have, this is the beginning of a discussion to some extent. And this is sort of a way for us to think about what is a discussion and how can we find other ways to have a discussion, especially online, if we can't just sit and talk to each other. And I want to point out that there are actually even some advantages to having this kind of discussion. So first of all, it's immediate. You notice that in 1 minute, everyone just sat for really, some of you, it took you only seconds to fill out that form. And we had the responses right on the board. It's a democratic kind of discussion because no one's, pushing or talking when someone else is. Everyone has their own space to really write what they think. They're not really being judged. So it's not like the person who's more shy will get less of a chance to speak. Rather, everyone can participate and it's not an issue. And here again, as teachers or educators, we can also expect full participation. We can say everyone has to fill out this form and we can't have anyone shy away from that. And in a discussion in the classroom or in any other forum, if it's in a community or even amongst adults, many times there's a few dominant people who are the ones that really take the lead and other people don't get a chance to talk. I already mentioned about the anonymous part and how that may feel more comfortable. We get a sense of the group and the mapping of the group. And there is an element of surprise because here, I didn't know what you were going to answer. And it was really interesting to see how things divided up. This kind of question in another group might have split half-half, and it would have been really interesting. And also for the group itself, it would be curious, everyone would be curious to see, wait a second, what do most people think about this topic? So what I want you to do now is if we're talking about a discussion, what do you think are the characteristics of a good discussion? We've already seen that most of you agree that writing your opinion on a scale is not a good discussion. So I want to suggest each one of you can write one characteristic of a good discussion in the chat box. This way we can all see. And while you're writing that in the chat box, and I'm sure there'll be a few people who agree with each other and write similar things, I'm going to pull up something that we prepared in advance. And I'm assuming that some of the building blocks that you think are in a good discussion, we did too. So I'm going to also open up the chat box so I can see. So we have reasoning, which already came up. We have diversity. We have ground rules. A good discussion isn't just a chaotic place where everyone just says what they want whenever they want. Having a good discussion really entails flexibility. There are few opinions. We learn from a discussion. There's dialogue. People said about listening. There's a passion in discussion. If we're really in a heated discussion, it shows that we're really, really into this topic. We have something important to say about it. We're convinced. But we also need to come open to listening to other people. It expands our horizons. If we had a good discussion in a classroom or in a group, we really feel like we left that room with something new to think about. And I think that it really sometimes isn't so easy, but we need to take a stand sometimes and really think about what our opinion is. And sometimes when there's a discussion, that really makes us, that forces us sometimes to take a stand, to really think about what our opinion is and to be honest and to have integrity about what it is that we really think about a topic and not just shy away from voicing an opinion. So here are the building blocks, and I see that in the chat box, people have written many more things. Michal, if you want, you can also read off a few things from the chat box, maybe something that wasn't mentioned here. So you're welcome to just chime in here.
I'd love to find out what the 3 before me rule is that Stephanie said. I haven't heard of that one before. There's a lot of active listening here. Room for silence. And equal airtime for both sides. Those are the main things that have come through here.
Okay, great, thanks. So if anyone wants to add like a sentence or an insight, now's a great time. If you would like to share something really about how you think, what you think a good discussion is and maybe how to facilitate a good discussion from your experience. if someone wants to say something. Okay, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to say something in a different way. What we're going to do now is in your chat box, you'll find a link to a Google page. This Google page is built similar to a Talmud page, which is one of the main books of Jewish culture, the Talmud or the Gemara, which is basically built also visually in this way, where there's a central text, the text that's being discussed. There's a quote from the Mishnah, and then and more comments from the Talmud itself. And then around the center, the text that's in the center, we have a discussion basically and different commentaries about the issues that were raised on that page. We're going to do something similar and sort of write our own Talmud page about a source that, as you can see, is a visual source. It's a photograph of a graffiti wall that was created after the assassination in what's called today Kikar Rabin. It was called Kikar Malchei Israel. And after the assassination, it was named after Rabin. And it's the location where Rabin was assassinated. And right after that happened, people started just writing on the wall and created this spontaneous graffiti. And as you can see, first of all, there are different things written side by side. There's, it's an interesting image to think about a graffiti wall also as Talmud and as a kind of a discussion. So you're welcome to open up the link and add your own thoughts, your questions. My suggestion is if you're writing a question, write it in italics so we can see the difference between a comment and a question. And feel free to just take one of the rubrics and start writing, and even to maybe write a response to someone else's comment or question if you like. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to do that. And I'm going to also share with you what the document looks like when it's coming to life. I just want to mention there is a link under the image where you can see the image much larger. You can zoom in on the NLI website. And there's also some information and some translation of things that are written on the graffiti wall. So if you like, you can go into that link while we're here or at a later time. I think some people are writing here about the Hebrew and what the number is. And it just, I think it makes us appreciate that when we're looking at a text, not all of our learners have the same access to it. And that's also very important to remember. I just want to say that looking at this page come to life for me as an educator, this is just very exciting, like to see how it's almost like sitting in a classroom or sitting in a room with a group of learners and just see the different colors and the movement and how people are just writing and engaging with this text. I see that someone accidentally erased our image, but we're going to try to get it back on. In the meantime, as you can see, this is really just a taste of a method that you can use with your learners. So I feel like we could have just spent another hour or two unpacking everything that is being written here. I'm going to remind you that you have this link to this Google Doc. You're welcome to make a copy and then erase what's written and use it for your learners as a fresh, clean page, or use any piece of this if you like. Just keep in mind that everyone here is shared as editors, and that's how you can write on it. And also when you share with your learners, make sure they can edit the document, but then keep in mind that it has a life of its own. And if you want to reuse it or you want to import it to another group, then you need to make a copy and start from the beginning. I know it's really hard, but I'm gonna sort of ask you to pause a little bit and look at what is being created here. Again, if somebody wants to also respond to something that someone else wrote, you're welcome to. I see that some people have asked questions. Maybe someone wants to attempt to answer a question that someone else has asked. If you have any thoughts, and I also want to show you, I'm going to give you a sneak preview of the rest of this document, which we created for you and for you to use with your learners. I'm going to scroll down for a second. Of course, you have this link opened up on your tab in your computer. So, but look at, if you're looking at the share screen, you can see that we already have down here, and some people already, I guess, figured out that we have 2 more Talmud pages with texts that are also about Yom Rabin. And some people have already written some comments, and there's another quote here from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. What I want to just mention is that in the end of this session, we're going to send you this presentation. In this presentation, in the end, there are some links that can be useful to you. And one of the links is to a lesson plan about Yom Rabin. It's not this lesson that I'm giving you now. It's not this session exactly, but it does have all the text we've been using here. And it really gives you a thorough kind of a systematic lesson plan about Yom Rabin using these texts and additional texts. And you're welcome, of course, to use that as well. And it comes with a source sheet and everything. So all the texts that I've been using in this session appear in the lesson plan. And this way, if you do decide to use the lesson plan, you come with that much more background and experience. So what I want to just say about this little exercise is that, again, with a very simple tool, a Google Doc, which I think most of us use for many other functions, for work or for collaborating with our colleagues, here we have a way of creating a discussion in a platform that really is challenging when it comes to verbal participation, and creating a discussion between 10 or 20 or 30 and sometimes more people can really be challenging on Zoom. And many educators are speaking now about the challenges of Zoom and how we're really enjoying seeing each other's faces, but it can be very tiring and really difficult to have a real discussion on Zoom. This is a way to sort of have everyone in the group express an opinion and be part and be engaged. And at the same time, it's not as tedious and tiresome, and it doesn't entail so much concentration like listening to people on Zoom for such a long time. What I also want to say is that this is a kind of document that can be leveraged and used again by the educator, meaning this we're doing now for 5 minutes, but as an educator in a classroom or with a group of learners or in a community, I can actually use something like this for an ongoing conversation. I can use this as a platform for people to later choose one of the other students' responses to the image and then write a response to them. I can have them divide into groups according to the things that they've asked. I can have each learner ask a question and make a comment. This is a document that you can save and refer back to at a later date with the learners after they learned another source or another text, and they can reflect on what they wrote in the beginning of the process, meaning there are multiple ways that you can use this very, very simple platform in order to enhance learning and in order to encourage discussion. Teachers in a classroom setting, I would even suggest you can write the students' names in the rubrics before they see the document. And then it takes away the anonymous part of being able to just write what you think without showing your name. But it does give them some accountability. And if you want each student to participate, you say, well, you must write at least one response to this and one response to someone else. So this is, again, just a taste. Again, I think it's something that you can really dig deeper in. And what I'd like to do is, first of all, if there are any comments or questions, if anyone wants to share, and now's a good time to ask or to say something about this method before we're going to also start to wrap it up and also look a little bit at our Padlet wall, which was another method that can be used. Does anyone want to maybe say something or comment? Okay, so I just want to say something about the metaphor of the graffiti wall. I think that graffiti, as many of you know, in many situations in cultures, really symbolizes a rebellion or some kind of social message that people feel they need to sort of just put out there. And sometimes it can even be considered an illegal act that someone sprays something on a wall, and it can even be considered vandalism. But I think these days we know that graffiti artists many times are really relaying a message that's important to a lot of people. And in some cities in the world, and maybe some of you can share, there's actually organized graffiti artists actually putting up graffiti art in different places in the city in order to relay messages. And I think that it's not a coincidence that after the assassination of Rabin, this graffiti wall was created. And think about it. Why didn't the municipality of Tel Aviv paint that wall over and say, you know, this isn't appropriate. This isn't the way we commemorate Yitzhak Rabin, and this isn't an appropriate kind of behavior. And even more so, why did the National Library of Israel decide to include a photograph taken of that graffiti wall in the National Library? Why was that considered one of the maybe sources or important artifacts from Israeli society at the time? I think those are questions that we can really think about deeply, and we can encourage our students to think about. What is worthy of being remembered? What is worthy of being framed and brought to the public? And I think one of the big roles of the National Library is to do just that, to preserve Jewish culture in so many different forms. So I think it's just really interesting to also think about that aspect of the graffiti wall and how sometimes things that might seem negative are actually do have a positive effect. And we see that it's a very complex situation, because Yom Rabin itself is about discourse and how sometimes words can become violence. And so we're always, as educators, I think we're always in that really complicated area of when is it right to say enough, this isn't appropriate, and when is it, wow, good for you, you're voicing your opinion and it's so important, and how do you do that? So really just for, I wanna just share with you the Padlet wall that we sent you in advance. Some of you posted, some of you can post now if you like. This is another way of creating some kind of discussion between people in a group. So here we have the question itself, or the topic for discussion. And here different people have posted different things. What's great about the Padlet wall, and as you noticed, this is also a little bit like a graffiti wall. People can also respond or like or love something that someone else wrote. They can agree. And again, with learners, with students, depending on their age, we can really encourage them to write a comment on each one of the other students' post, or at least respond to 2 other people in the class or 2 other people in the group, and either disagree or agree. It doesn't have to mean, you don't, I want you to notice that on this page, no one wrote a comment, and maybe you weren't sure you were allowed to, but no one wrote a comment that had any pushback about the things that people wrote, which is fine. We have some likes, we have some support. The question is, when do we, again, as educators, push our learners, push our students, and also on a personal level, when do we push ourselves to really think about what we don't agree with, where we want to voice our opinion and not just say, okay, I don't agree with that, but I'm not going to say anything. Sometimes it's because we don't want to confront people. Sometimes it's because we're afraid of maybe what the ramifications will be. I think, honestly, from my experience, sometimes we're not really sure what we think, and we don't want to voice an opinion on a topic. We're not convinced about this idea we have, and we don't want to sort of come out with some kind of announcement and say, oh, I think this and that, and then we won't be able to support it. But I think, and I see this with younger students, definitely in Israel, it's becoming harder and harder for some people to have a really solid opinion about things. And at the same time, we see extremists going very far with very extreme opinions. So I feel like that's one of our big challenges. And if we go back to the topic of machloket, if we want to continue the conversation and to have our students be part of the grand conversation, be it about Jewish culture, be it about Jewish history, or any other topic, we really have to find the ways to encourage them to be part of the discussion, to be part of the conversation, and not to shy away from expressing their opinion. So I'm going to go back to our slideshow, and I'm going to ask, this is the poster. I'm going to show you all the links.
Shuvi?
Yes.
Sorry, there's a question in the chat box.
Yes.
From Robin about the Hebrew words of alimut and ilimut.
Okay. So on this graffiti wall, we see in red this word alimim, which means violent people. And it might be part of a larger sentence. Alimut in Hebrew is violence, and ilmut is when someone is mute, they can't speak. It basically means silence. And personally, I taught Tanakh for many years. I taught Bible for many years, and it to me goes back to the story of Joseph and his brothers, where it says that they couldn't speak to him in peace. Lo yachlu dabro shalom l'shalom, which means it's like they couldn't speak to him, and there was no communication between Joseph and his brothers. And I feel like that's really an example of when there are no words, sometimes there's violence. When there's no communication, sometimes it results in people acting and doing things that are that really are an extreme violent act that really isn't the right thing to do, because they couldn't find the words to say what they think. So those are the 2 words in Hebrew. And I think that in the Hebrew language, I think it's really interesting. A lot of times words that are sort of similar or have a similar root, sometimes it also symbolizes certain things when it comes to the meaning. So it's always nice to dig into that aspect of the words in Hebrew. You can also see that on the bottom of Yitzhak Rabin's picture, it says Shalom Chaver, which, by the way, we didn't discuss that at all, but that really became the title and the most, the sentence that's most linked to the assassination of Rabin, that Bill Clinton said at the funeral. He said Shalom Chaver. Those were the 2 words he said, and that became like sticker and the slogan that really became one of the most central things that people remember after the assassination. So here we have, like I said, all the links. We're going to send you this by email, so you'll have everything you need. You'll see that this is the lesson plan for Yitzhak Rabin, and we also have some information in our blog. And there are other general resources here that we really, really encourage you to visit each one of these pages and sort of get to know our resources and see what we have to offer. You'll see that it's on many different topics. And of course, in the sessions to come, we'll be touching upon other topics. Any questions, any comments at this point? We're also gonna send you now in the chat box the feedback form, and we really love to hear from you, because this is really just, we're launching this webinar series for you, for educators, and we really want to be attentive to what people need and want. So we're really happy to learn from you and get your comments. So if anyone has any questions, now's a great time also before we need to end. It was a pleasure seeing everyone. And again, if anyone has any other questions, really, you're welcome to write us your comments in the feedback form. You're welcome to email me. And I'm really excited to see you next time, which will be about SIGD. And we're gonna actually also have a guest speaker for some of the sessions. So hopefully you guys will join us. And if you can recommend this to any other educators you know who you think can benefit from this, really, you're welcome to do so. Lior, do you want to say a few words before we have to part?
Just thank you very much, Shuvi. That's it for now.
Okay, so here in Israel, it's almost 11 p.m. So I guess good night and good afternoon to some of you. And it was great seeing you.
Thanks, Shuvi.
Hi, Carrie. Good to see you.
Thanks so much. Bye.